Okay, now we're officially live. So I'm gonna go back over, like I told you, I'm gonna go over to Facebook and make sure that's all set. I did get some friend requests, so I think I want to make sure I accept those because those are probably people wanting to see the show. So I'm gonna see if I can get. So I do have that posted now. I'm gonna go and change it to public, and I'm also gonna see if it'll let me tag you in it. Sometimes it doesn't, but it should. That way, I'll do like you said. I'll tag. I'll even go ahead and try and tag your wife. See if that'll work. So you'll probably get additional alert about that because I did just go
Okay.
live on that. So I'm going to make sure I accept those because those are probably people wanting to see the show. Oh, now you're hearing double voice. Yeah, I just pulled up the video on there to see if that was all working. So I did get that set up. I'm gonna go back over to Facebook now, or back to the StreamYard setup. So the good thing is we are at 5 now, Sheriff Malone. So you're at your projected 5 people watching live as we speak.
All right.
So I did tell Sheriff Malone that I really do think we're going to have way more than 5 people watching tonight, and we already do have 6. So we've already exceeded that, and we haven't even started the show yet. I do think, well, I wanted to give the audience a heads up on, and Alan and I spoke about this too, is a way for people to watch this live. So I got this set up on Facebook. It's been made public. So anybody that, whether you're Facebook friends of me or his, you can watch it. I do strongly encourage the audience to help by sharing the video. You can actually just hit the share button. It'll go on your Facebook profile, and then everybody else, whoever might be your friends, will be able to see it. I know Alan's got family in Florida, so I'm hoping they'll have a chance to comment. I did tag him and his wife in the post. Other than that, just a brief pregame before we actually, so no one has actually missed anything yet. I'm going to start the show here soon. I got Sheriff Alan Malone on tonight. He's going to talk about numerous different topics tonight. No time constraints given. I do want to tell the audience too, much like I do on past podcasts, that I encourage you all to feel free to comment on the Facebook posts, say anything you want. If you want to say hi, if you want to ask me and him any questions, or like I told him, if anybody's got any embarrassing stories that they want to try to entice him into saying. I heard he's got a good sense of humor, so I think that it's going to be interesting to see. We already up to 10 people watching live, so I do want to say thank you for joining us live tonight on a Friday night. But again, you haven't missed anything. And like I said, I'll have this going on Facebook Live. It should be going on my Twitter account as well, and the Chapters Podcast Twitter account will also be able to see that. So those 2 different social media platforms will have live access. The video will stay up the whole time. And then lastly, before we start, actually, I'll go ahead and show you this. Alan, see, Rod Malone says Rod is here in his Facebook comment. I know. So what I'm going to do is I was explaining to the sheriff here that whenever people comment, I can actually spotlight your comments on the screen, much like Rod's, much like Susie Vote says, hi, guys, and hi, Susie. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for sharing, Angela Malone. She says, Angela, she's just wanted to make sure, giving her a shout out there. So thank you, Angela, for joining us, too. So again, like you've seen Rod, Susie, and Angela commenting. Tommy Joe also says, go Uncle Alan. So I love that comment as well. But I did want to tell the audience, too, that once the show is completely done, probably like an hour and a half or so afterwards, I'll have it uploaded on our YouTube account. And I'll also be putting it on Spotify and all that. So I know a lot of people do things like running and things and listen to podcasts, so they'll be able to do that. Tara Lucas, she says, hey, proud of you. So that's an awesome comment from Tara. Tara, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Again, no one has missed anything yet. Dave Hinton, who's been a previous guest on the show, says, evening, gentlemen. Dave, thanks for joining us, man. It's good to see you and hear from you. But what we'll do now is we're gonna take a brief pause. I'm going to play some theme music to really start the show, and we're going to dive right into it. So, Sheriff Malone, are you ready for your first podcast experience?
I'm ready. I hope.
Awesome.
There's
yeah, I'll have to acknowledge these comments again here a little bit, but Carla Collins Owens says, hello, Sheriff, on there. So I thought I'd put that. I'm having a hell of a time keeping up with the comments tonight because I already got a bunch more rolling in, which I'm going to touch on yours. Go ahead.
I thought I had like 3 friends, but I looked like a couple more.
Yeah, you got so many friends. You're so popular. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and start the theme music, and I will touch base again on the comments that's been going on. But thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm excited to talk to Sheriff Malone and hear more about him. So again, there'll be a brief pause, music plays, and then I'll do the intro. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 31st episode of Chapters, Real People, Real Stories. And tonight, I have a very special guest joining us, the second guest on Chapters podcast that's involved in law enforcement. A shout out to Derek Llewellyn. If he's watching tonight, I've had him on and had the pleasure. But tonight, I have Perry County, Indiana Sheriff, the county that I live in. Sheriff Alan Malone is joining tonight to talk about life, family, community, his time in law enforcement, and of course, his battle and recovery with COVID-19. And again, we did some pregame before the show. This is Facebook Live. It's also going live on Twitter. Encouraging the audience to feel free to share, hit the share button. Let people that don't know or are friends of mine or Alan's on Facebook, they'll be all be able to watch it with it being public. Other than that, I do encourage comments throughout. You can comment, say hi, ask any questions, and I will try to spotlight those. We had numerous people saying things before we actually went live, and I had noted those like Susie and Rod and Angela, Tara, Dave. You have all made comments. Some new ones here. Yvette, she says, proud of you, Alan. So thank you for dropping that comment in here. Megan Schneider, she says, Megan Schneider is here to support you. You're great at what you do. And of course, Mary Kay Elder, she says, Mary Kay, go Sheriff. And as well, Cindy says, hi, son. So great comments to start there. Again, I encourage everybody to continue doing that. The beauty of it is I'll be able to continue to put those up or so Alan and his wife and everybody can see it. But let's get really started here. Alan, so welcome to the podcast for the first time. How you doing?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, like I wanted to say, I'll jump right into chapter one, which for chapter one is just really for the audience to really get to know Sheriff Malone. Like I told him before the show, I know of him very well. He knows my older brother. But I've never got to truly know him really more. I consider him a friend. And that's what this chapter here is all about. It's really just getting to know him for the audience so you can appreciate and invest more time into what he has to say later. So let's get started right there, Alan. We're going to go with where were you born and raised, a little bit about your family, like your mother, father, siblings. And you're also welcome to talk about your immediate family now, like your wife and any children.
Okay. Well, I hope people know that I'm Alan Malone, the sheriff, Perry County, and I was born in Owensboro, Kentucky, and my mother is Cindy Dietrich, and she currently lives in Spring Hill, Florida, with her husband Bob. Also down the street, who always watches out for me, is my dad. He lives about a block away, and my dad Rod Malone and his wife Angela Malone is all live here. So my mom was a nurse, I think, for 74 years. No, I think my mom was a nurse for a very long time, and I grew up with her being a nurse, and so I knew a lot about the medical field from my mother from there. She, like I said, she currently lives in Spring Hill, Florida, or Brooksville, Florida. And my father, who was the plant manager at GE and moved along to a place called Pell City, Alabama, and eventually lived in California. And he never gave that opportunity to be there. I know he gives me a heart about that. So we want to go to Pebble Beach and play some golf. I like to play a lot of golf. So, but my parents, Cindy, and my dad, Rod, were very supportive of me growing up. I think as a young kid, they were kind of worried about me that I wasn't going to turn out so well. But I also got a sister named Melanie, and she is also a nurse, and she lives in Brooksville, Florida. And like I said, she's a nurse. And just for the record, I think she used to be a bully to me. But I think I got to that time where I could handle her. But she was a tough cookie. So I hope Melanie's watching. And so say hello to her. And as well as I got my wife. Everybody says I'm the sheriff and I'm the boss, but currently she is the boss. And I'm not scared to say that. But no, she's very supportive of me. And then I also have my daughter, Rachel Malone. She is 22 years of age. And she is currently, not for sure why, but she is traveling around in southern Indiana in jails, dealing with mental illness in jail. So she just currently graduated from college and has a good job. And then my two stepsons, Tyler Groves and Austin Groves, and Tyler is a electrical engineer, and Austin is a electrician. So got a good family, and really proud to have them.
Well, I want to say first hi to the boss then, Denise. She's also about. I think she's off to the side somewhere.
Yeah,
But
she's over here.
but
She's camera shy.
camera side. No, that's awesome. But I do want to say a comment about your family. It definitely sounds like you have a very strong, devoted, and dedicated family. All the way, not just like your wife and the kids, but like your mom and dad and everybody. I do want to acknowledge another comment. Like Tara Lucas says, "Team Denise." So there's some support for Denise on there. I hope she loves that comment too.
Well, I cannot forget about my favorite daughter-in-law, Kaylin. She's a nurse, and I think she's working right now in Evansville. She is a nurse, so I know she's probably not watching, or she shouldn't be watching right now, but she will watch it later. So I really have a lot of respect for that young lady, and that's my daughter-in-law, Kaylin.
Yeah. Hey, that's awesome job going through that, Alan, especially whenever we factor in what we're going to be talking about later and everything within the story. But again, like Tara had just popped up on the comments, feel free to comment through Facebook, ask any questions or say hi or anything that you want to comment on whatever topic we're talking about. Again, part of chapter 1, Sheriff, is on stories within our community. Like I grew up in Counton. I've shared stories in the past of my childhood or things that make me think of growing up there. And I'm very curious for you, like when you think of either whether it's where you're up at, where you currently live, whenever you think of community, what is a story or two that comes to mind?
My mom won't like when I say this, but I did live in Florida for a short while, but this is home to me. Sorry, Mom, but I don't know why. I just always wanted to come back here. This is where I was raised, and I felt like this is where I needed to be. And again, sorry, Mom, but I know she's proud of me, very proud of me, as she calls me a lot and tells me. But I had the chance to stay there in Florida. I worked for the Department of Corrections in Florida as a very young child. When I graduated from Springstead High School, which is in Spring Hill, Florida, it's funny as I tell the story. When I was younger, for some reason, I always wanted to be a police officer, and that was my goal. I knew that a professional baseball player was probably out, and my mom and my dad would probably tell you how I used to jump over couches, and I always wanted to be a SWAT member. Never quite made all the way to SWAT, but I did take some training in SWAT. But it's funny, as I grew up, what drew me to police officers, law enforcement, I have no idea. Nobody in my family is a law enforcement officer. I'm the only one. So I guess I'm the lone wolf when it says that. I really can't tell you what got me involved in that, but something drew me, and here I am, this age of 32. I mean 52. So I am 51. I'll be 52 in April, and very happy that I have had a long career in law enforcement. I'm really proud of what I've been able to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Share the details. I had to comment too because you mentioned being like the dream of being a basketball player. It makes me think of because the people ask me that at work all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh man, you must have played baskquall because I'm like 7 feet tall. I'm like 6'5". But I'm like, yeah, but the only thing that was really holding me back was talent. I just wasn't didn't quite have that or the hops to continue to. So maybe thinking that. But it's interesting how you kind of touched a little bit there on law enforcement and where we're going. Of course, we're going to talk a lot about that here in chapter 2, but there was not like one set thing that kind of drew you to it. You kind of talked about the SWAT as well, and you kind of dabbled in that a little bit, which I think goes into a great organic question. But I did think of, or the next question, but an organic question I thought of when it comes to community, and actually it's just Tell City. I recently had, the Pick Perry organization was on Chapter's podcast recently, and it made me think of a great question to ask you on the spot, to put Leo in a little pressure too, is I had asked them of like a place here, and some like businesses come to mind or restaurants come to mind, something that has either returned or used to be here that you hold dear to heart? Is there anything that comes to mind within like the Tell City, Perry County area that you always enjoyed going to as a family or whatever that still exists, or any kind of place that you'd like to acknowledge?
I always thought of the need as a kid, Main Street. I was always drawn to tell, on Main Street and how crazy Main Street was. I mean, Main Street is nothing like it was 15, 20 years ago. And just that environment, I liked it a lot. I liked being here. I was big into sports as I well as in Florida, but I know that this was probably where I belong in Perry County and in Tell City. And I can't tell you how it drew it to me, but it was something that I enjoyed a lot once I got here. And I've always liked the times that I spent in Florida. But again, I came here and it's like I picked those friends that I was young, at a young age. And then after I got back into Indiana, I got to meet those friends again. And it was just, I picked right up where it left off. So when you say community, we're very lucky to be here. I think I'm very lucky to be here in Tell City or in Perry County. And it just shows how close, when I got sick, how, I know we'll talk about that, but how people supported me. Not only here, but really all over the country, really were sending me a lot of things about when I got sick. So it was kind of neat, but just being this young, sorry, my dog got me. It was kind of neat to, to see how much support I had for the entire county.
Yeah. That's very well said, Sheriff. I know, like I use the word community a lot whenever I have guests on, but it's really interesting to hear it too from someone that serves the community in the capacity you have. And I know you're going to touch on this, but like you had said before the podcast in the pregame, that it was like 30 years now within law enforcement, I believe what you said, or 30 plus years. So I can't imagine all the experiences and stories that you've had, and some of them you might want to share tonight. But I actually want to take you back, like way back. You said you're 32, 52, somewhere in between there, somewhere. But like if we had to go way back to like whenever you first started your law enforcement training, whatever that onboarding product, like at work we call it kind of like onboarding. I'm very curious to hear what your onboarding experience was like back in the day. Like, what was your training like? What was your first day on the job? Maybe even who mentored you? And that's a lot of complex questions that are kind of slumped together, but just feel free to that particular question however you would like.
Well, I always start telling people I went to school when I graduated from high school, and I tell people I went straight to prison. So I worked at what they call Withlacoochee Vocational in Inverness, Florida. And I wanted to be a police officer so bad. But at that time, I was only 18 and 19 years of age. And in the state of Florida, you could not be a police officer at the age until you were 21. So I was 19 and I had a chance to go to Corrections Academy. And it's back then it was 12 weeks in the state of Florida. So I spent 12 weeks training to learn how to be a correctional officer, but I switched over and took classes with law enforcement also. But back up again, I wasn't 21 yet, and they definitely was not going to give me a gun then. So I started working at a prison called Sumter Correctional Institution, and they had around 1,500 inmates. And next thing I know, I got hired, and the first 6 months I spent for about 4 to 5 months in a tower. And I thought this is not going to go very well for me. I ended up in a tower watching things on night shift, and very, very boring. And so I spent that time, and I'll never forget the time I got a call from a Captain Wilkins at Sumter Correctional Institution. He called me. He says, "Are you ready? Come down and work on the road or work on the yard." And I remember he called me boy. So I was a young kid. I don't think I had to shave every day. So I started working at a prison like that you got people in there for life. And again, I was only 19 years of age and working in a prison in Florida that was pretty tough. I saw a lot. and my mother will tell me that it made me grow up pretty quick. Some of the things I saw, I didn't think I was prepared to do, but I was able to handle it pretty well. I was a canine officer for the state of Florida. We had a bloodhounds, and so I did tracking with them. And then it came to, I had a chance to go to Branchville Correctional Facility. So I talked it over with my mother. I also talked it over with my parents, my dad, and I decided to come back to Indiana, and I got a job right away at Branchville Correctional Facility. So I went from Florida to Indiana, and I started working at Branchville, where I served about 3 years. And that was in 1989 when I started working in a prison and law enforcement. So I got a few years out there.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that even the prison experience background you had working at the prison, that I didn't even know about you that you'd gone in, but I can imagine I couldn't do that either. Like working in a tower, especially on night shift at the time.
Yeah.
You don't strike me as the kind of person that could do. Not that you couldn't do the job, but it's just like kind of like wasting your potential, I guess you would want to
Well,
say.
I was confined and I was
Yeah.
young. I was one of the youngest correctional officers in Florida. They started hiring at that age, and I had a lot to learn. And I remember going down there on the yard, and I was on night shift. But my first time in the morning at 7 o'clock, the whistle blew, and next thing I know, I'm looking about 1,200 inmates coming at me, and I was like, "Oh boy, what do I do here?" So I was able to handle it. It's all how you handle yourself, and I survived. I'm still here. So it was different working in a prison system. But I truly believe that's how I got to where I am today. For working in corrections really helped me mature. It helped me understood about what I had to do and how I became what I do now. And I think the interpersonal communications skills that I learned from working at a prison, you don't carry a gun in prison. You had to talk and get through a lot of situations just by talking to people. So I think that's what made me to where I am today, just being able to talk to people.
Yeah, I mean, I actually I'd love to comment on that too. I wanted to acknowledge one of the Facebook comments. Phyllis Simmons says, "Team Alan Malone." So I'm seeing a lot of that, a lot of team out there for
Yeah.
you tonight, Sheriff. But I know what comes to mind too with your experiences early on. There is it really did sound like it built a lot of your foundational traits or
Mm-hmm.
strengthened them more because of your experience, like your dialogue. I know one of the scenarios that just popped in my head I'd like to share is you involved with the prison and seeing what inmates go through, what even the security officers go through, and you could end up in a situation now where someone has the potential of going down that road, like they could
Mm-hmm.
end up being in prison,
Mm-hmm.
and you could have a way of empathizing for them, like, hey, I've seen it kind of what it's like. This is not a route you want to go down. It's a very hard way to like learn a hard lesson. And you could probably think there's probably a lot of situations where stuff could have been prevented over the years because of your efforts with dialogue and your strengthening.
Yes.
I mean, I like to think there's at least one person out there that you had a positive influence on changing their mindset to prevent them from getting to that point of being there. But just to continue on the onboarding topic too, I love that story there. I'm actually curious too on it can be about transition to law enforcement fully or so on. But I'm kind of curious too. I love asking the question at work in the role I'm now with them. Whenever I have floor employees in there, I'll always ask them, "Tell me about your experience, your first day on the job." Like, I want to know your first master brand. Were you nervous? Was it all overwhelming? Blah blah blah. I'm kind of curious from a perspective, your first day on the job. Yeah, I'm sure you probably haven't forgotten much about it, but I'm very curious what Alan Malone's first day on the job was like.
Well, I was 25 when I got hired by the Tell City Police Department, and it was one of those things where I remember I always looked up to Greg Intersot, and I remember I was able to be a reserve first, And I remember I used to call Greg and said, hey, I'm not working at the prison tonight, but I'm a reserve. That was like in 1993, excuse me. But I was reserve first in 1993. And I remember I used to call Greg, say, hey, I'm off tonight. Can I come out and ride with you? And I know that Greg Hendershot probably said, yeah, come on out. We can't wait to have you. But then he's like, oh God, he's coming out again. I don't know if anybody knows Greg Hendershot out there, but that's who I rode with a lot as a young patrolman. And I remember doing a lot of things with Greg Hendershot, and that led me into being with David Falkenberg. And I don't know if you know Bob Hackle and Joe Davis. So mentors, those were probably, Greg was one of my bigger ones, as well as David Falkenberg and Bob Hackle and Joe Davis. And I was a kid, and they called me the kid. I will say some other things they called me, but I will keep this PG. But I was a little bit of a hothead. I came from prison. It was hard to believe that, it's funny how it evolves now. I hire people now, but it's funny how you think, how did I end up here? And I think when I applied, I think there were 30 people applied. Somehow, some way, they hired Alan Malone for the Tell City Police Department. So I went to the academy in 1995 and got hired full time. And my first day, I remember I was riding with Charlie Ballmeister, and we had a wreck on the 4 lanes up by Lincoln Plaza and Lincoln Park Plaza. And here I was in a police car for the first time as a full-time police officer. And I was working this big wreck, and I thought, how did I get to this point? And it just kind of picked up from there. I enjoyed it. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I'll never forget the times that they asked me about my insurance one time. And I said, did I sign up for insurance? I guess I got insurance, and then they started talking about signing up for my pension. And I'm like, yeah, I guess. Let me know where I signed. I had no idea really what a pension was. Of course I do now, but those first couple of weeks on the day shift, I thought I knew it all, but no, I did not. So I had a lot of guidance tell me what I should be doing. So I learned a lot from those guys.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I loved how you included the mentors in there, and several of the names I'm not 100% sure I'm familiar with, but several I've heard of. So it's really cool to hear back in again way back whenever your first day experience on the job. I know I thought of another great organic question. This is probably going to be a lot of fun tonight. I know a couple of the comments I wanted to acknowledge real quick. Rod Malone had said maximum security prison in Florida.
Yes.
The one then Drew Fort Wendell, he's a friend of mine. He said he made sure I never missed a tray. He says, "Howdy, Sheriff." I love the emoji that you chose to use there, Drew. That's awesome. I have to ask one because I don't know. I'm assuming this is like something that all law enforcement has to go through, but can't remember if this is just like your first time you have to do this or if this is an annual thing. But don't you guys have to get pepper sprayed and tased?
Yes.
At different times? I'm sure that Alan Malone had to go through that. So, and I think I talked to Derek Malone a little bit about it, and I think he ended up saying that pepper spray was worse than the tasing. So I'm kind of curious for you. Do you remember that experience, and which one was worse?
If I had a choice, either a taser or pepper spray, I would rather be taser. It lasts for a very, very short period of time, but the pepper spray lasts a lot longer. So it kind of got nice because I became an instructor in pepper spray. So sorry to all my guys that worked for me or I worked with. I pepper sprayed a lot of my police officers and correctional officers and deputies over the years because I'm an instructor for pepper spray. So I've sprayed a lot of people.
Wow.
I'll apologize to all the people out there, but
the sheriff has a lot of victims, a lot of pepper spray victims.
Yeah, I am an instructor in that, and just recently, about 2 years ago, I pepper sprayed some of my guys, and it's an empathy thing that we do that. People don't understand why we do that, but they need to understand what they're carrying and what they're capable of, and in case they get sprayed themselves. I remember a time where I got sprayed by Joe Davis, not on purpose, but unfortunately we had a suspect that did not want to do what we wanted to, and we had to go hands on. And as I grabbed a hold of him, I remember Joe Davis was sprayed us both. So thank you, Joe Davis out there. But so that kind of stuff there is really have us understand about what those tools are capable of.
Yeah. I say it's actually a very interesting perspective you had there, because I always kind of wondered that myself, Sheriff, is like why. Just kind of a funny mini story real quick is years ago, maybe it's just a family thing, but I kind of thought about getting involved in law enforcement. So I did a little bit of, I guess you can call it ride arounds or job shadowings. Remember my older brother, I went a couple of times when he was a cop with him a little bit, and John Cleveland too. Eventually kind of got away from it, but I remember one of the things that was very, very much not looking forward to when I heard about it was the tasing and the pepper spray thing you had to go through. I was like, wait, we got to do that too? Yeah. Nope. I want to change my career right now. Yeah. So I did want to acknowledge another comment. Drew Fort Wendell just had posted, this man has allowed many life-changing programs inside the jail as well. So that's also a great perspective, Drew. Thanks for sharing that on there, that, even though someone's like in prison in that sense, that there's still therapy going on in recovery. It's like they're not wanting people to come back out. You want to come back out changed for the better. I got another comment here. Like Cheryl Hauser says, Friday night entertainment, best sheriff ever. Love that comment. Thank you for sharing that. Again, feel free to continue to comment as we're going on here and everything. But another question, this is like another big story for you, Sheriff, is, and I asked Derek Wound these similar questions, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this too. I can't imagine the amount of stories, experiences you guys have had, but there's good and rough, traumatic ones you guys experience. I had made this comment to Alan before the show started, that I had Derek Allen on because I wanted to give people a different perspective of law enforcement, that they're also human too. They have their emotions. I remember Derek touched on different things, and I wanted to ask you this too, is can you think of a story or moments over the years you'd like to share that brought a lot of pride to you in the job? Like it kind of gave you like reinforcement, like, yeah, I'm really glad that I got into this career because of stuff like that. Like, is there something that comes to mind that you'd like to talk to the audience about?
I would say I became a detective. I was on the road for about 7 years, and then they asked me to be a detective, and I truly thought that I would probably ride out my whole career as a patrolman, as a road patrolman. I never thought that they want to ask me to be a detective. So I said, yeah, I'll try it. So they gave me a tryout, and it worked out for me. I think I was a detective there for about 13 years. And I still remember that they used to make me wear a tie and a really nice clothes, and I had to go out and buy new clothes because I didn't like to dress up. So I became a detective, and over those years, I worked a lot of cases and with a lot of kids. Those reward you a lot, but those also bring you down. And dealing with a traumatic day, dealing with a death of a child or seeing a child hurt is always hard to deal with. I don't think, and I say this many times, that we are human people, and a lot of people think that we're these macho people and everything else. But I mean, I can remember telling my wife on one certain case, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And I always get up and proud of what we have done. But working with the kids over the years, I worked a lot of cases dealing with kids, and it was kind of weird because you went from working on the street and riding a police car and a uniform to working plain clothes, because kids didn't want to talk to a kid in uniform. That's why we started wearing plain clothes. And so those kind of cases were very tough. I remember when I got promoted to assistant chief here at Tell City, I said at that time it was time for me to come out of the detective role, just because the things that I have seen over the years, I still see those kind of things, but working those cases right there, dealing with kids are the toughest ones.
Yeah, just to comment on that, that's one part of the reason why I would love to ask both those questions about the good and the harder times, because again, you guys are also trying to cope with that too, which is something we'll touch on.
Yeah,
But
you
go ahead.
really, I really became very, very close to a lot of the people that I dealt with over the years. I don't want to say their names, but there is one um, lady that I know had a very bad time with a case that I worked. But to this day, she still reaches out to me once in a while and just tells me, "Hey, how you doing? You're doing good," or whatever. But you come across some very, very good people. Um, some of the victims' parents that we dealt with, and some of the kids now. You know, I've got kids that I've dealt with that as they got older, they have come up to me, talked to me, and thanked me for some of the things I've done. So that kind of touches me. That let me know that I was doing the right thing. And dealing with the kids were always the toughest cases. Trust me, it was the toughest cases.
Yeah, so I don't know how detailed you can go into this too, but again, so many stories, so many experiences, and a lot of heartbreaking ones, a lot of justified ones, even that time wherever justice needs to be served for whatever reason. But you're talking about anything, even in a small area around here, or your experience over the years, from Florida on here in the prison. But like you think of drugs or domestic violence, or murder cases, abuse cases of different kinds. I know one of my family members, again, just it was involved in like child abuse cases, and
Yes.
that's one of those things I can't imagine what that's like, whether it's like a predatory situation or a physical abuse of some kind. Those are things that I think of from an outside perspective. That, man, that's why I can't do that. I can't be in law enforcement, because I don't think my psyche and heart could take that. I mean, whenever you think of those things, I mean, are they all encompassing just critically bad, or one that kind of stands out above the other that you just absolutely dread going in to deal with?
I learned it's called finding words, and I learned how to talk to kids that were victims of a lot of different things, and it's amazing what you're able to get from kids. You can't lead them, you can't, but there's certain ways we ask kids how to do. If something had happened, you just can't say, "Hey, did this happen?" You can't put them into their mind. So you got to always make sure that the way we were asking things, we wanted to get the truth from these kids to making sure that we weren't missing something. So it was very tough to get the information and come talk to these kids. I mean, you would think that if you would see some of the interviews that I had with these kids, is I would be on the floor with them. I would be on their, on the floor, sitting with these kids. Um, it's kids are neat. Um, and a lot of times, a little kid doesn't know how to lie. So, we would try to get the truth out of these kids and see exactly what happened without just come out and ask them. So it is very tough to deal with that. But when I talk to a kid, I would never have a gun on. I would never have a badge on or anything. And I would always enter myself as just, my name is Alan and I'm here to talk to you. So those are always tough, very rewarding. Some of the cases that I worked, the cases that um, a lot of hours, but I always thought that, I'm doing the right thing. They were tough. I went home and talked to my wife a lot, and I would never tell her what happened, but she could just tell that it does take a toll on you. And I don't think I wear a cape or anything like that, or so it was kind of hard to decompress when you work those kind of things coming down.
I know that some of the takeaways I had from what you shared there is a lot of fundamental traits, just in general, that are for you and for those in your profession, like communication, projection. Like when you talked about how you project yourself, basically is what I got from it. Like plain clothes instead of like a uniform. A
Yeah.
uniform could send a wrong message, even though you're not trying to send a message that way. It could make someone more intimidated to speak openly. But that was something I got from part of that was that, you have
It's funny. One of the things that I always did, and it's a lot of fun. And I don't know if anybody knows Nancy Rainey out there, but I used to work a lot with Nancy Rainey, and I remember as learning how to talk to these kids. I remember I used to get on the floor and I would say, "Well, I'm going to draw a picture of you," and I don't understand, but they always drew a picture of me with no hair, and I could never get over that. But I always tell them to draw me, and they always drew me with no hair. I do have a little bit left, but so it was an experience that I'm glad I did. Very rewarding, but again, I was kind of glad to get out of it too. But I still remember them drawing those pics. I wish I do still have one actually in my office right now of a kid drew of me, and again, no hair.
Oh man,
And I still
wish you'd
got it
have
to
that
this.
for the show.
Yeah,
I'd love to
well,
see that.
it's on my desk right now, and I don't want to say her name, but she is older now, and she'll still come up and give me a hug, and so it's kind of neat to see that kind of stuff, and those make me realize how proud I was and how glad that the Tell City Police and law enforcement allowed me to do that kind of stuff.
Just to acknowledge a couple of comments real quick. Tara Lucas also said this is what makes you so very good at this job. And Jennifer Hall also went on to those experiences helped to make you the sheriff that you are. So some positive reinforcement there for you, Sheriff. But again, like just to touch again on the dialogue part, there was you having that ability to relate to the kids or talk to them, no matter what age they are. I love how you said you kind of you get down to the floor, like you're getting down to their level. You're not standing over the top of them.
Yeah.
Hey, tell me what's going on. You're actually trying to like listen and create like a conversation and build a relationship with the person that for how long it lasts in order to find a peaceful resolution or find the truth that's necessary for the situation. I'm just kind of curious too. Have you? I'm trying to figure out how to word this, but like you talked about like things that you from back in prison and back up to where you are now, and I think of that communication aspect you talked about is on the dialogue side of things, whether it's kids or people at my age now or older. Do you find that you get like you're kind of speaking on the behalf of law enforcement in general, but for you, do you find in order to get the answers you need, do you catch yourself trying to listen more and ask questions than it is more of like trying to answer somebody? That's something that I'm trying to do better of myself is don't be afraid to ask questions and let them kind of lead you to there, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. I mean, I could never just go right into it and asking questions. It was getting to be just a meet and greet at first, and get them to trust and believe in what we do. And I had a team behind me at all times to do that. I had people in the background that would listen to me in a little piece, and it was just kind of neat. Some of what you'll never believe what some of these kids will say to you, and it's tough, but it really made me who I am today. I really believe that. I always wanted to be that macho cop with the uniform and everything, but the rewarding stuff or dealing with the kids, and I later became a hostage negotiator, and that taught me a lot how to deal with those kind of deals also.
Oh, that's great. This another organic question for you, and this is probably going to make you feel like you're going to be tooting your own horn here, but it made me think of the mentors that you've had in your past, and now with your experience, I'm sure you've had cases where now you're kind of passing your knowledge and experiences down to those that are the next generation of law enforcement or so on. Have you kind of had situations like that, or any of them that you like to talk to of people that you're like, hey, this is kind of what I learned, and you're kind of passing that knowledge on? Have you had
Yeah,
instances
I mean,
like
to this
that?
day, I still get a lot of the younger police officers that ask me questions or how they would handle that, or they might run something by me and what do you think about it? So it's kind of neat that they still trust me now that I'm just a little bit older, not very much older, but um, I used to make fun of the older guys. I always say, yeah, the old guys, but now remember I am one of those old guys. But it's kind of neat that some of the guys, some of my deputies, some of the police officers will actually come to me sometimes, and to me, that I think says a lot about me and the relationships that I made with, my as well as my deputies, but the police officers and even the state troopers. It's kind of neat that family, that the bond that we have with the other law enforcement in the family, and we call it a family because we are. So it's kind of neat that they would come to me and ask me questions or my advice on things.
Yeah, I love that. I wanted to ask this question directly again before we had moved on, just to make sure I didn't want to leave anything out. But again, stories and moments, things that brought a lot of pride to you, and you also talked about a little bit the harder moments. But is there any moments or stories, however detailed or however vague you want to share it, that like that maybe stood out to you a lot, that really like rocked you as not just as a person? Or is there anything that you'd like to share on that before we move forward?
I can't. Well, I can, but I just don't like to give those because I don't want anybody to understand what I'm really talking about, or I don't want to give
Yeah.
that out. But I just know this job is tough. Um, I wouldn't change it for anything. I've often talked to Denise about other things I can do, and I remember one time she said, "You can't do anything. This is the only thing you know how to do." Um, I can't go to nothing against anybody, but I just know me, and I couldn't go to a factory, or I couldn't. This is me.
Mhm.
Still love it. Um, I am older now, but I still have that drive, I think, to do that.
Yeah.
Um, Saying on here, I used to enjoy reading to Tommy Joe, my niece. She worked at Tell City High School, or Tell City, the school. I used to like to read to the kids, and I know Tommy Joe enjoyed it when I came in there. I don't know if she liked it because she got out of class, or she really did enjoy me being in there reading to the kids. So sorry about that, Tommy Joe.
So I'm sure Sheriff Malone's got a lot of talent. You got to correct me again on this if I'm wrong. I do want to acknowledge Rod's comment too. He says so many people in the community tell me what a great job he is doing. And of course, Tommy Joe's comment was up reading stories to first grade classrooms. The kids love Sheriff Malone. So there's a lot of talents that. But the one I was going to ask is because I think the last time I've seen you in person, maybe it's was when my youngest was in high school. They would have this annual like lip sync battle at the school. And now, correct me, but like, weren't you one of the judges like every year? I'm pretty sure you were involved in
Yeah,
that. I'm just kind of curious if you really enjoyed that.
yeah. So John Hayes, who used to work for Tell City High School, now Crawford County, we had a lot of fun with that. I think we did it 3 to 4 times. John Hayes and I were asked every year, and we had a lot of fun up there. I never understood why they never got me up there dancing, but um, I always enjoyed that. I don't know. A lot of people know I was a high school basketball coach too, with John Hayes and John Lyons, and but so I knew the kids, and we just kind of related with them, played with them, and joked with them. So I think that's just kind of made who I am. And you walk around, so I'm the big bad sheriff, whatever. But that part of me gave me an out from being a police officer, but I got to deal with the kids. To me, I feel like that's who I am.
Yeah. Interesting. Before we had moved on from the law enforcement topic and start talking about your story of the battle with COVID, I wanted to ask you this one last question: is when it comes to the mental health of law enforcement like yourself or your brothers in arms, I'm very curious, at least for you or even for those around you, like how you guys cope with what mental challenges you have. Because I mean, I think when Derek was on, he touched on how you hear statistically, I think so on that uh, drug addiction or substance abuse can be a thing. Like you can tend to smoke cigarettes more or
Yeah.
something like that. I'm just kind of curious for you, like when it comes to coping with those times. You catch yourself. What do you kind of catch you guys yourself for doing for comfort? Like, do you kind of lean on family? Is there certain hobbies that kind of give you centeredness around it? Like, what would come to mind?
I think my family always knew that I never did talk a lot about what I did. Um, but that's why I think the law enforcement family that we have, with like Eric Dickinson and Damian Marsh and some of the things that we've done together. I think that's how we cope the best. Just talk with each other. I never went home to talk to my wife about some of the things I've done or did. For one, I didn't want her really to know what I did. But dealing with those things over the years, I think because we have such a support from each officer, helps out a lot. Myself, I would have a hard time with things, and my officer used to come up with me and pat me on the back and say, "Good job," or I would go up to some of them and say, "Hey, you did well. Good job. Do you need anything?" And you wouldn't believe some of the text that we would send each other or calls each other after a big scene, how we would lean on each other to get through those things, because I never wanted to go home and tell my wife or tell my daughter or tell anybody, because I don't really think, unless you've done this job, I don't think the people on the outside, I kid my dad sometimes about, he would shake his hands, I can't believe you do that kind of stuff, but we do. But the support from our own people really says who we are in this local area of Tell City and Perry County. Even from the state troopers to the Tell City Police to the deputies at my sheriff's office, how we're able to cope and always reach out to each other. That says a lot for this community.
Yeah, I love it. Another thing I thought of it too is I want to kind of reword the way I have this question, but it's kind of like public viewing, still kind of on the mental health topic in a way. But one of the things I got from is like the local community, like you guys with the law enforcement here. But I know there's a times too when you're dealing with state police or fellow counties and their enforcement. So I think that's awesome how you guys do communicate, work together in certain cases. But I also think of like the fire department, first responders, and those in the medical personnel, whether it's paramedics and at the hospital. If you could speak to what all the commitments and dedication that they've all done, like those that is involved with the fire department, medical, like if you could give them a shout out in any way, what would you have to say about their kind of support?
It all said a lot about all of us here in Perry County. A couple of years ago, we had an unfortunate scene. I don't know if you heard it. Remember where the Girl Scout camp, when there was a storm there, and unfortunately, a little girl got killed, and we had a debriefing, and for how we were all to come together. We got law enforcement, we had emergency management with Steve Hauser. We had a lot of the first responders, how we all got together and we sat around at a big table, and I will never forget it. I can still see it, how we dealt with that scene. Anytime you dealt with a child that has basically died in front of us, it was tough. And I think we were able to get, now something we'll never forget. I know I will never forget it, but how we were able to cope with that by just talking with each other, and it went on from there. I mean, even to this day, it's amazing to see what those Girl Scouts have done for us now. I mean, I asked them, please, no more cookies. I mean, we got cases and cases of cookies, and but how they reached back out to us, we did a lot for them, but to this day they're still returning to us. So that says a lot about what we do, but it also says a lot about the community that we live in.
Yeah. That's a very good example of a story. Traumatic. I do remember hearing that locally about the news about the child. But I love how you said that you guys all kind of dealt with that situation like a big support system there too, to kind of get through all that themselves. And the Girl Scout kind of has a connection to you guys and shows the support. Like you said, you have a lifetime supply of cookies.
Yes, we do.
Because of your efforts.
Yes, we were passing out cookies for a long time after that. So the last time they came to see me, they usually reach out to me every year, and I told him, please no more cookies. Please no more cookies. So
Yeah, before we talked about the COVID thing, it's kind of a funny story time. I'm actually hoping this entices you to share something, even if it's something on my older brother, John Matt. He's not currently here to say on this one or defend it. So I kind of have a John Matt story and I have a Richard Myers story.
Oh, Richard, yeah.
Like if he thinks of the Malcomson twins, he will say the same story every time. But I know the John Matt, there was this one occasion, and this would be like the luck for me. I'm not saying how lucky I am, but there's been several times in my lifetime, at least I'd say, where I've been poor for whatever reason, like cheating or something. And the cops at the time that would read my driver's license, all that, that would be the constant question I would get when they come to the vehicle with my registration and license is, are you John Matt's younger brother? And I'm like, yeah. I still remember when Kenny Kellum stopped me, and he knew me anyway. So he literally just told me that if your mom knew I pulled you over, she would whip your ass.
Yeah.
So he basically just told me to slow down. I remember one story in particular. It was New Year's Eve. I was in high school. I worked at Bueller's Bilo at the time. We had worked way up until midnight cleaning the store. So when I left there, I remember I thought my vehicle was acting up and I thought my e-brake was on. And when I leaned down to pull it out, I swerved a little bit into the oncoming lane. It happened to be a cop coming right at the same time. Of course, he flips around, pulls over in front of Walmart. Routine, like, hey, now, da, da, da. I get the perception of things because of the timing. But of course, he took my license and everything and went back, and he came back and did the same thing. He's like, are you John Matt's younger? Yeah, I am. But I was nervous I was going to be in trouble for what I did. But he just ended up telling me a story himself about my older brother and them having some kind of situation where they're beating somebody or whatever, and he fell, and he said he ripped the ass out of his pants. Like John Matt, like blew the ass out of his pants. And I remember he told me just to slow down careful. He's like, make sure tell your older brother that I told you that story. Which I just thought was so funny because it went from like a really nervous situation for me to this funny story of my older brother. But one about the Richard Myers one, this involves Mama Malcomson. I've told this so many times. But when I was a little kid, me and Robbie were kind of little shitheads. So just to be honest, I mean, the Malcomson twins were called the Terrible Two in a way. But I remember, I still don't to this day know if it was me or Robbie, but Richard Myers still remembers it. He was passing down our street, and I don't know what the reason was. I have no idea now. But I remember Mom was out front, and Richard passed by, and for some reason, one of us was just like, "Look, Mom," and we flipped off Richard. Like we flipped him off for no apparent reason, no good reason at all. And he's on his brakes. I remember, flips his lights on and throws it in reverse. And of course, we freak out. Like I still remember, like freaking out running. But I remember he like scared us shitless about that, and he still to this day, I think, still remembers that story.
Oh,
and I'll joke with him. I'll joke with him and say, "You're still number one in my book, Richard." Like that's just. But I still remember Mama Malcomson like whipped our ass for that one. Like she used a tree limb on that one, which we deserved it. And a tree limb got all these little branches. So Mom gave us the deservingly lashing for that one. But it was just a funny, like when I think of the sheriff department and Richard Myers especially, I think of that story. But like for you, I know funny story or a John Matt story. Or is there anything you'd like to share there?
Well, as a young kid, when I started at Tell City Police Department there for a while, we rode bikes. And I always tell a funny story on John Kleeman because he got something caught in his tire and he flipped over. And I first checked on him and then I laughed for a long time. So we got a lot of those good stories. We've caught a lot of people in cemeteries, and so we got a lot of good stories with Kenny Kellum's in a cemetery. So it's fun to look back at some of those things. I mean, we do have a lot of tough jobs, but the humor that we have, sometimes it's not political, correct? But some of the funny things that happened to us over the years, I wish to this day I could tell a story on Greg Hendershot, but I'm afraid he's listening, and I'll probably
have to bite your tongue on that one. Huh?
Yeah, I will tell you, John Allen was with me, and it involved a taser. And Greg Hendershot probably don't want to hear this, but it was a great story, and we all looked at each other, and we all laughed for a long, long time, I can tell you. But it was involving a taser. So I know John Allen knows what I'm talking about, as well as Greg Endershot. So
Nice. Well, as long as they never forget, that's the important thing.
we probably will never forget it.
But before we continue on, I know this is. I want to acknowledge this too, because several of the local news agencies had involvement with you on this, with your battle with COVID. I knew a little bit about your situation, but very little detail compared to what the actual whole story that you went through. And I really wanted to talk to you about that tonight. Is your experience with battling that virus. So, however you'd like to share it, how it all started to your recovery, feel free to share as much as you'd like on that.
Well, it kind of starts, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know how you say that, but I am the public information officer for the health department. And so we started learning to hear a lot about COVID, started getting a lot of cases here locally. And you always think that'll never be me. I would kind of protect myself or what have you. So I had a lot of information about the COVID. And from there, I got a little sick, and I remember that Tara made me take a test, and I tested positive for COVID, and that's where it started. And I remember telling my wife, and I said, well, I've got it. And so it started out with just a small symptoms, but that led to me being very, very sick. I still remember it was the end of December, 1st of January of last year, of 2021. And I became very, very sick. A lot of throwing up, I guess you can say. And I just remember just laying in bed saying, this can't be, this has got to pass. It's got to pass. Well, it didn't. And for me to ask my wife to take me to the hospital, she knew I was sick. I still remember her taking me to the hospital, and it was tough because, and I know people have experienced some of this, that I had to drop her off, or I had to be dropped off at the hospital, and Denise was unable to come in at the time. And so that was tough, and not knowing what was going on. So they took me into the hospital, and I just thought they were going to give me some fluids or whatever because I was so, so sick. And I had the worst headache ever. And that's how it kind of started right there. I just remember how sick I was. And so from there, I remember they came in and told me that they were going to transport me to Owensboro. And I thought they'd just give me some fluids and I'd be on my way. But next thing I knew, I was in a ambulance. Well, let me back out. But first they asked me, they said, Mr. Malone, how long have you been a diabetic? And I said, you must got the wrong chart. I'm not a diabetic. And they said, no, all your numbers said that you're diabetic. And I said, okay, I didn't know that. But apparently the COVID raised my numbers, and I was the lucky one to become a diabetic now. So I remember when I went to the hospital and they transported me to Owensboro, they right away started giving me shots for diabetic, and I didn't understand how sick I was. So I was in there 5 days, and 6 days, 5 days in Owensboro, and I just remember being so sick that I wasn't allowed to have any visitors, and even the nurses wouldn't even come to your room very often. They would talk to me through a speaker, and that was tough. How it's not that they treated me wrong or anything, but it was so just distant about how they were treating us. Not bad, but I don't think COVID was very popular yet, becoming popular, but it just was weird to me. You think of the doctor and the nurse was going to be right there with us, but they weren't. And that was tough. one of the neatest things I can tell you from that experience, the first time I was in the hospital, I remember they did come in my room, and we were on the 5th floor, and I'll never forget, they kept saying, they called me the sheriff, and they said, "Sheriff, we need you to come to the window." And I was like, you know how sick I am. Do I want to get out of this bed? I'll never forget it. And they said, "No, you need to come to the door. Come to the window. You need to come to the window." And I still remember to this day, I was thinking, why in the heck do they want me to go to the window? I'm in Owensboro. What am I going to do here? I'm sick. But I'll never forget, I walked to the window, and at that time, there was probably 30 police officers or police cars sitting there, and they all turned on their lights. And I know that my chief and lieutenant got all these people to come all the way over to Owensboro from Spencer County, from Dale to Santa Claus to Spencer County to Tell City Police, all my deputies, EMA, all came there and parked in a big, and they all turned on their lights, and that was pretty neat. Just started showing me how much support they had for me. Of course, I was kind of embarrassed. I'm like, man, they're going to think something's really going on here. But to see the look down over all them lights really lifted my spirits, I guess you can say, that maybe everything's going to be okay. And to see all my people. So then I got a phone call, and I got to talk to them on the phone, and, you know, they all wished me well. But they told me they had to go back to Tell City or wherever they were going. But I remember them leaving, and I thought, you know, that was pretty neat, how much support that I had. And that was one of the neatest things that day. So it went about another day or so, and they released me. And I can remember they're telling me now, they're giving me stuff about being a diabetic, how to deal with the COVID. And they told me, you're going to have to start giving so many shots a day. I don't know if anybody knows this out there, but I'm scared to death of needles. And so I went from just having COVID to be a diabetic, and my headache went away. So they decided to release me. And I can remember being scared. I never thought I would ask to stay one more day, because I really didn't understand what all was going with me. And I just remember them saying, "No, we've got to get you out of here. We want to get you home." So the next day I went home, and from then it got worse. I went home. Denise took me home, and I don't remember anything after that except for I woke up in a helicopter. And I know we weren't going for a joyride, but I woke up in a helicopter, and I thought, this is not good. And the next thing I know, I woke up in a hospital, not knowing where I was, and I was tied down to a bed and restrained. And I'm usually being on the other end of this. I've never been tied down. So I didn't understand at that time, but I was told I had a stroke. And that was directly from the COVID that caused me to have a stroke. I later learned that I had 2 strokes. And it was weird. At one time I kept asking them, did I get in trouble? And I thought maybe I had anthrax or something, because it's called a pampu or something like that, pampus, but it's a enclosed thing around all the nurses and the doctors, and that's what they wore. And I didn't understand anything from then about what was going on. So I tried to escape, tried to get out of the room, and got tackled and was tied up again. I can laugh about it now. I didn't laugh very much about it then. But I just remember being very, very sick, very confused, not understanding why they were doing this to me. But I guess I was in ICU. They kept explaining to me the stroke, but I didn't know anything about a stroke. The only time I ever had anybody with a stroke was my grandfather had a stroke when I was very, very young. But so I didn't have any knowledge of what a stroke really was. I have heard people having strokes. I have heard people had died from strokes. I've heard people who had survived from strokes. So I never really knew what was happening. So it's a good story that I can tell you that when they would not ever, I kept, at first I didn't know who my wife was. And I can joke about it now because I get a good sense of humor. And I remember they'd write it on the door every day, or on the chalkboard up there. They would write Alan Malone and Denise Malone, and they even put sheriff, and they said, "You're the sheriff." I was like, "Shit, that's pretty cool." I didn't realize that, and because I didn't realize who it was, and they kept saying, I said, "What did that say?" And they said, well, "That's your wife, Denise." Of course, I couldn't read it, and to this I didn't understood then why I could not read anything. And I remember it kept telling me I had a stroke, and I kid with Denise sometimes. They said, "Well, who is that again?" And I'd say with Denise, and I was like, I hope she's like 25. So, but it was kind of weird not to understand what was really going on with me at all. I started to remember Denise sent some pictures to me. Jay Stiles, good friend of mine, was able to get me some pictures. And from then I started kind of remember, but the funny thing I can say, everybody became Melanie. Now, Melanie is my older sister. I called everybody Melanie. Why, I don't know. I think she liked it because she was pretty popular then. Everybody became Melanie, but it wasn't until I was in there maybe 4, 5, 6 days before I really understood what kind of was going on. So I remember them telling me to calm down, and I did. And then I started to understand what was kind of going on. And I remember talking to my wife. I remember talking to my dad. But still, everything was kind of weird how it happened. And I didn't understand how I even got to this point. And they kept talking about having a bad case of COVID, but they said it directly caused me to have 2 strokes. So from there, I can just remember I finally got to see Denise for the first time. And I will never forget, before I got to see her, I remember all these nurses, they would all have these things on their head, and I would freak out. And I remember this lady, I'll never forget it. I even asked for her last time we had a doctor's appointment. And, and I remember her taking all that off, and she held my hand and she said, "You're going to be okay." And I don't know what that was, the calming sense that I finally had, that it was actually somebody actually touching me, telling me everything's going to be okay. And not some person in this big thing on their head and a hose coming out of her head. And I just remember her saying, "You're going to be fine." And whatever she did then kind of changed the way I felt about what was going on. So I finally got to see Denise, and I didn't know whether to hug her or yell at her, because I remember asking her, "Where the hell have you been? Why haven't you come to see me?" And they told me, Denise had COVID very, very bad. She was pretty sick. I thought it was a contest. She won. I won. I was the second one, I guess. But so the first time I got to see her, I gave her a hug, and she explained to me I had a stroke. And I said, first thing I asked for her, I remember saying, "Where's my phone?" My phone is my life. It's my job. I carry a phone with me everywhere I go. I go to the bathroom, I carry my phone. So, I remember getting my phone, and I took it from Denise, and I looked at it, and I remember looking and saying, "This is not my phone." And Denise said, "Yeah, it's your phone. It's your phone." And I said, "Well, who changed all my settings on here?" And I kind of yelled at her. I appreciate that. But I didn't understand why I couldn't read anything. And when I say nothing, I could not read anything. And I kept saying, why did everybody change this to Chinese or some other? I just didn't understand that. And she says, you had a stroke. I said, I know that, but why can't I read? And she kept telling me that you had a stroke. So I accepted that. And that night, they moved me out of there and moved me to Fraser, which is another hospital there in Louisville. And I truly believe Fraser saved my life. And they moved me to believe it or not, they put me on a kid's floor. And so I fit right in
Big kid.
on a kid's floor. And they started giving me therapy right away the next morning once I arrived at Fraser. So it was being moved from one hospital to the other. But again, I really didn't understand how bad it really was. So the next morning I got up and they started telling me that I want to have 3 sessions a day of therapy. It was occupational, speech, and physical therapy. And I got irritated because I like to get up. And I remember they had a pad on the floor, and every time I touched it, it set off an alarm. So I would play with it, like, they could tell if I was up. But I got up. I wasn't sitting down. So I was able to get up pretty quick. And I didn't know if I was supposed to or not, but I did. So from there, they started to, I remember the first time of one part of my therapy, they wanted me to count a lot of change. And I still remember this like it was yesterday. But they put a lot of change out there and they said, we want you to count this change. And I thought, this is not necessary. And I counted and I got to like $1.98 and it just stopped commuting. I mean, it stopped. I couldn't count anymore. And I remember just breaking down saying, well, what is wrong with me? And my wife came in and said, you've had a stroke and you got a long way to go. But I remember them saying that, we know you're a sheriff. And I was like, yeah, I'm a sheriff. And I remember them telling me that I might not ever work again. And I was like, no, I'm not going to accept that. And I'll never forget the lady looking at me saying, you got a lot of work to do then. Get to work. So we did. We started working hard. Sorry, Mom and Dad, I did not work hard in high school. I got by in high school. But I had to work hard on figuring out what took place with me. And I really truly believe that I hope the lady is watching, named Susan. I'm not going to say her last name, but she kind of, I met her later, but in the hospital, I met some really good people to try to have me understanding what exactly happened to me. From even getting kid blocks, I couldn't build things. I couldn't put things together. Fortunately, they started with my physical therapy, and I was able to get up, walk, no problems there whatsoever. And if anybody knows me, I can spin a basketball on my finger forever. So they let me do that, and I said, "Look, I'm fine." But I still couldn't count. Or I remember one of the things they gave me was a comb, and I could look at it and I could see in my head it was a comb, but I couldn't say it. So it was very, very frustrating to understand what was going through my mind is, I'm going back to work, and how am I going to do this? So, so from there, I was in there about 12 more days. And at that time, I learned that my best friend had died of COVID, Jimmy Broniker, who was my best friend. And I remember the lady told me, she said, we know your best friend died. And but what would he want? And I kept working hard for, for my family, but also it made me realize, how bad this was, that my best friend died. So they did let me out, and to come to Tell City so I could go to the funeral. So I remember that day that I got to come home. First time I've ever been really embarrassed. It's a good story if you want to hear it.
Oh yeah, go for it.
So I didn't know it, but Denise was coordinating with Steve Hauser and Eric Dickinson that I was coming back to town. I was getting released, coming home. And I remember driving, and I wanted to get home so bad. I wanted to lay in my own bed. I wanted to be normal. Never going to be normal, but I wanted to be normal again, but I could not wait to get home. So when we got to the interstate in 37, there was 2 police cars sitting where one of Steve Hauser's and my chief deputy, Eric Dickinson, and Damien turned on all their lights and led me from the interstate into town. And okay, that's enough. I kept saying, let's turn your lights off. I don't need to make this out. And I remember when we turned off of New 237 in Mozart Street and by the old junior high school, there was a lot of commotion there. And I didn't understand what was going on then. So we pulled in, and I thought, man, there must have been a wreck there. But when she pulled into the parking lot, I saw all my people, and there was probably 30 to 35 police officers there, all in the parking lot, clapping, happy to see me. At least I thought they were. And I was told I wasn't allowed to get out, but I didn't listen. And I was able to get out of the car, and all my police officers and deputies and a lot of the nurses, the dispatchers, there was probably 35 to 40 people there waiting for me. And I thought that was the neatest thing I've ever seen. How them all came there for me. And that was kind of a neat story, dealing with them, and getting to see them for the first time in probably 30 days. So that was kind of showed a lot about what they thought of me, but also what I thought about them. So it was kind of a neat story that they came to my aid like that. And, the hugs, and I know we weren't supposed to hug each other, and we weren't supposed to, give high fives, and I couldn't help it. The nurses and the dispatchers and the correctional officers and the police officers, they are really lifted my spirits a lot, because I didn't know where I was going to go from there. So from there, I started coming to Fraser 3 times a week, or 2 times a week, back and forth from Louisville. Of course, I couldn't drive then either. I was told I couldn't drive. Dr. Markham took care of that for me. Thanks, Dr. Markham. So I started outpatient there at Louisville.
Well, I did have several comments. I know you had to talk for a while there, so I'd love to give you a little bit of a mental break too. And it was just, I have a lot of comments. I did want to read the Facebook audience's comments first too, and some of them are related to this story. Some of them actually occurred before we started talking about COVID, so I wanted to touch on those first. One of them was from Megan Marie Schneider. She says, "I want to express from a personal experience that being incarcerated can be a dark experience. Alan Malone has the authentic ability when communicating that brings light to somebody's journey. He's always on your side in the aspect to remind you who he knows you can be and not the mistake you made to put you in your situation. Big supporter. Can't thank him enough." Drew Forward also said, beautifully written in response to Megan's comment. Megan, that was a powerful comment. I wanted to use that word twice there, not just with Megan's comment on there, but during your story and when you came home for Jimmy's services and stuff, and having that welcome. I mean, I can't think of another better word than that. And it fits so well with what we talked about earlier whenever you used the story of the Girl Scout camp incident and how all the medical services and law enforcement were all working together in a way like they were for you. between the hospital, 30 police cars out front from different areas. I love the people there that you have. And one of the things I will say too, because Jimmy was another one that I knew of. I didn't know him real well, and to realize like he was like we were best friends too. I know even in spirit he was right there with the rest of welcoming you coming back home because you were going through what you're going through, and I can only imagine what he was feeling for you, and then for him to go through that same experience and all that on top of what you're going through. I just can't imagine what all that weight is there, but a lot of beautiful moments in that whole story, but a lot of trauma too. Like I can even feel to me like Denise's like what she was battling too, but also watching what you're going through, your loved ones watching you struggle. That's kind of a question I wanted to ask you before we got more of the audience is, I don't think they would want to talk to you as much about it, but have they shared with you what that experience was like from their perspective, watching you, someone they love and care about, going through like this scary, nightmarish situation?
You mean what they saw in me?
Yeah, I don't. I guess I don't want it to be too personal, but like as far as your family goes, did they talk much to you about it? Like what that was like for them, watching you
Well, I
kind of
think,
bedridden and having to go through all this therapy?
yeah, I mean, just to me, I mean, I got my family, but I also have my law enforcement family. And to see them that they were there to do whatever I needed, for one, to get better, but also to know that they were there to support whatever I needed from them. Um, that showed a lot for who I am, but also shows a lot who they are. You know,
Hmm.
how they came to my aid, and I know that they would do anything for me. Um, that was touching. How they wanted to take care of me, and all of our life, our job is to take care of everybody else, and that's what we do. But to see them there to wanting to take care of me, I think said a lot for me. How well they took care of us.
Yeah. Some of the more of the additional comments I wanted to share before we continue was Sandra James. She said you were on every church prayer list for sure in Perry County at the time. These are comments too that were going on while you were walking us through the story. Tara also I think try to help you with the pronunciation of that one word. I was trying to remember earlier, but she put that on there while you were talking in the middle of the conversation. She also said, "We love you. You got this." This is whenever you were visibly starting to have a tough time with your story. Rod also said, "Yes, we do." Yvette, she said, "We love you." Some great comments here too. Kim Robertson says, "Perry County is lucky to have you as our sheriff. Lots of love." Tara went on to say, "Wouldn't have missed your homecoming for anything in the world. You've made us proud." I love that comment, Tara, having on there. Because like you said, you guys just did a good job. I wasn't there in person, but it made me feel like I was right there seeing you getting welcome home. Beth Hauser, she ended up saying that Alan is one of the best people you can meet. He might be an awesome sheriff, but he's also an awesome individual, super person all around with a heart. Kathy Kleeman Hammond, she says, "We have known Alan since he was a little boy. We love you, Alan, and we are proud of you." So I love those comments. Tommy Josie said, "We love you, Uncle Alan." So that's awesome. Cindy, she said, so proud of you, like always. So I love the comments. Keep them coming. I will definitely keep acknowledging them. But yeah, just wow. I mean, that's all I could really say as far as your story with your battle with COVID. And I know we're probably still going to touch more a little bit on your recovery, but I just didn't know the level and the severity of what you had to try to recuperate from, like not being able to read. I mean, you're trying to process all this yourself. Like, yeah, I know I had a stroke, but why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? It's like you said, you are one of the people that's used to taking care of other people during these difficult situations, and here you are in that boat too. But man, just to hear about the support system that you had around you, I loved hearing that. But I want to kind of, you mentioned beforehand about Frazier, I believe, and some of the support you got there. Now they actually dubbed you a nickname there too. I was really fascinating the kind of support system you got there too. Can you tell us through that story again?
So I was an inpatient. I was always, I guess once a cop, always a cop. So I would, in the evening, I would come to the door. And again, I was on a kids. I don't know why they ended up putting me on a kids, a kids floor. So every night I can remember coming to the door, and when I got to the door, the nurse would look at me, and if they shook my head like this, yes, I could come out and kind of mess with the kids. That was kind of neat, and they don't understand how much they all thought it would help them, but they didn't understand how much that did help me. But I would be able to get a basketball out with them and just dribble a basketball or spin it on my finger. So I really truly believe that I felt like I was helping them, but they have no idea how much they were helping me coping to deal with what I had to deal with, and knew what kind of recovery that needed to happen for me.
That again, it just makes me think back to the support. Again, with the COVID, I will say that I'm glad to see you doing much better and much improved over when. If anything, it makes me respect the situation more. I think when we go back to COVID and all, I think you start feeling things really hit home on a personal level. You see those effects on you out or in. And I will say, from my perspective, Sheriff, is I remember during your battle, when it first started, I remember seeing just what felt like hundreds of posts about Sheriff Malone. He's in a bad situation, critical, and you hear words, especially when you hear anything about critical unit that you were in, like people thought you were going to die. I mean, there was you can tell a lot of people were hurting just at the idea or the thought that something terrible was about to happen to you. And I don't know if you ever got to know that, but like I said, even from me being hundreds of people that are on Facebook, I've seen that from so many people that were showing you support while you were still trying to figure out what you were even going through. I mean, a lot of your family can acknowledge that.
I didn't understand.
So
go ahead.
Do what?
I didn't.
Well, I was just going to tell real quick. Michelle Miller, she said, "Awesome sheriff and friend, great dance partner too." I like that. He's got the dance skills. But what are you going to say, Sheriff? Go ahead.
I tell this story that we shared earlier. I understand as the sheriff, they wanted something from me. So somehow, some way, they found my wife's number, and one of them ended up calling. And I remember later they told me that Denise and my chief deputy Eric Dickinson got with my attorney and says we got to give the media something. And so they put out something to let them know that I guess I was critical at that time, but to let them know that I felt at that time I was going to be okay. And that kind of had the news people kind of, at least they gave them something. But I remember one story. I hope Jessica doesn't get mad at me for saying this, but I'll never forget sitting in my house, in my hospital, and the phone rang, and I looked at it. Of course, I couldn't read. For some reason, I answered that phone call, and it was Jessica Costello from Channel 14 News. And I said something like, "I'm not ready, please don't." And I remember I'm not calling you to do a story on you. I'm only calling you to check on you. I promise you that's the only reason I call you. And that meant a lot to Jessica, to me, and said a lot about her. Because when she came to Perry County or Evansville, and she ended up in Tell City, that helped a lot to know that she wasn't there to give me getting a story. She just wanted to check on me. And I thought that was pretty neat, that she did that. And so she got my first story.
No, I love that one because I remember you telling me a little bit about it earlier. I think it was before we went live. But but if she's watching it, just nothing but respect you on that, because it's not, you weren't reaching out for the next big thing or this type of article. You actually just cared about him as a person, as a human being, and I thought that was really awesome to hear that. I'm sure there's many more stories there. I know we're kind of getting closer to the end of the show. I actually wanted to go back real quick to the career side of things, the law enforcement side of things, and if you wanted to share anything else on COVID, you're welcome to. But one of the questions was advice, especially for the younger generation. There are people out there that might be considering getting involved in law enforcement. If you could give any of them career advice going in, what would that advice be?
To get in law enforcement, I would never change anything I've done. Um, I'm very fortunate to get to where I am today. Um, I'm very fortunate to able to become the sheriff. Um, I'm very lucky to have a career at Tell City Police Department. So if you ask me if what I tell people, I mean, this job is tough. We're not in it for the money. We're not in it for the popularity. It's the old cliche about people talk, oh, we just want to help people. But basically, that's what we want to do. We are there for people, and we're problem solvers. We are ministers. We are plumbers. We are. Um, so wrap that up. I mean, it's not the most popular job anymore. It's not sought after like it used to be 20 years ago. The applicants have dropped down. We don't get as many anymore. But I hope people understand that, whenever I meet a young one, say, you got a long career, do the right thing. And this can be tough, but you can get through it. And let them know we appreciate what they do too. Because, this job is sometimes, believe it or not, some people don't like me. Because we have to make several arrests in my life that people don't understand that I'm doing a job. But to know how rewarding this job can be is incredible. How rewarding it can be.
I know before I completely close out the show, I wanted to wrap a bow around the conversation about your battle with COVID too. That I want to say you're still, don't want to say you're 100% completely recovered. Like, I didn't even realize you had become a diabetic because of this situation. That's something you got to deal with the rest of your life, But going through all those hardships and that therapy and everything you went through, has it made you kind of discover this more of a newfound appreciation for even the small things, like being able to read again or being able to speak and remember things not as well as you used to? Did that really kind of make you appreciate things a lot more after going through that experience?
Yeah, I look at things a lot differently. Yes, it's hard to explain. I, I, I realize that they said that I almost died. I don't know about that, but I guess you do appreciate things a little bit differently. You look at things a lot differently. Um, I've always been one of those. I can remember my dad was always, it's all about the job. And to me, it all has been about my job. My family's always been first, but that's the way I was raised. That my job was always very important to me. So I guess you can say I have taken a step back. Sorry to the guys that work for me, but I do pawn off a lot of things on them now, and that helps me. But I think that also helps them be more round about how they do things. I don't have to hold their hand, and the support that I had from my deputies, really, I think helped them. But in return, it helped me a lot to get back to where I am today. It was a year, January 10th of this year, my first anniversary, and to show that those guys that I still struggle. I can't lie and say I don't. I know that Frazier said it would take maybe 2 years. I think I'm ahead of school, ahead of the class. But I did have to work very hard to get to this point. to where I am today. I mean, am I 100%? No, I probably never will be. I probably never was, but it really shows. I feel like it shows who I am. And I get compliments a lot, and I appreciate that. But I get told a lot that how well I'm doing, but it's never, to me, it's never enough for me. You know, there are some days I struggle a lot, but I know I'm going to get back to that. You know, again, I remember they told me I would never work again, but I wasn't going to accept that. So.
Powerful. That's the word that sticks out to me more than anything. Is the word powerful. Just because now we're at the closing section. Before I continue to comment further, I did want to give the audience plenty of time. That if you are also welcome to share your closing thoughts on this podcast experience in this final chapter. It's where I'll ask Alan the same thing, and I'm going to share my own. But I'll go ahead and start. And again, much like podcast episodes before, I got a lot out of this experience. You know, like I said, I know of you, Sheriff, and I have nothing but respect for you. Not just what you do, but I do consider you a friend. I'm very relieved that you've recovered and you're still working on the way there. But I'm not the only person that's just glad to see you still around, your face here, because it just things wouldn't be the same without you. But you're walking me through the journey of your career. Like like I said, it makes me have a lot more appreciation, even more so with the law enforcement background, with what you do, why you are or where you are now, like being sheriff and being a leader for not just your brothers in arms, but for the community. And then also just on fun levels too, like you guys, finding ways to cope with mental health as a law enforcement officer. You guys had your share of humor too, even if sometimes it's not politically correct, some embarrassing stories and so on.
Well, I got
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't know if some of you guys know Derek Llewellyn. I know he's listening, but one day that Derek and I were headed home from Evansville from a graduation, I had one of my deputies and Chief Llewellyn had his graduate from Tell City Police Department. So we were coming home, just Derek and I, and Derek started getting this chest pain. And I was like, dude, are you all right? And he's like, I don't know. I'm getting chest pain. So, sorry, Derek, I'm going to tell the story because he's texting me. So I can tell you that I turned on my lights and sirens and we came to Owensboro. We came straight from Evansville. We were on our way home. So I just turned to right, got on the bridge, and we came to hospital. Well, thank God it was really nothing. It was just pleurisy, Derek. It was just pleurisy. So I remember we were both in uniform, but we had stripped Derek down. So everybody in that hospital that day thought that Derek was an inmate. So he walked through the doors saying, I'm not an inmate. I'm not an inmate. So that's a great story for Derek. I know he's listening. But I remember everybody in there really truly believed he was an inmate because he just had a T-shirt now and these blue pants that looked like inmate pants. But he kept yelling in the hallway, I'm not an inmate, I'm not an inmate. So thanks for Derek for giving me that story again. So
I like to imagine you weren't helping things by going, don't listen to the inmate. He's just trying to fool everybody. Yeah. Just keep calling him inmate. No, I love that.
Shady. He kind of shady.
I know he is a shady looking individual.
Yeah,
he's the chief of police.
Yeah.
Didn't say that on record. Don't arrest me for that. No, but I love that story. Like as far as my last closing thoughts on it, I did feel like I got to know you more as a person, and I very much appreciate you being open to doing this, you being open to sharing all of your experiences, good or tough and good that you would like to share. So more than anything, like for you, again, encourage the audience to do the same. Actually, I wanted to share a few of theirs too. Carla Collins Owen, she said, love you, proud of you, and so thankful to be a friend of you and Denise and your family. Megan Schneider, she ended up saying, Alan, I want you to know I'm at work right now loading and uploading wood on a machine. Still watching this. I wouldn't miss your story for nothing. That's an awesome support there too. And then Sandra James says 2 strokes in COVID in working in a high-stress job. Wow, Alan Malone, God is not done with you yet. Keep doing what you love. And those are some great comments. Like I consider those like closing thoughts from the audience. But Alan, for you, just thinking of the whole experience here on the podcast episode, what do you take from it all?
To me, I don't think it was about me. I promise you not what this is about. I think it's more of about where we live and what the society we live in, that we're always first to come and help people, but that's how people came to us to help me. And it's kind of neat that I really think that some of my staff doesn't need me, because it was like when I was gone, it was like I never left. I mean, they ran this place exactly the way I would have. So to me, that sounds a lot about my staff that works for me, especially David Falkenberg at the time, and as well as Eric and Damian Marsh, my lieutenant. Whatever I needed, they were there for me. And to say that, you know, the cards I got from Perry Central and the school that I got from, or the cards I got from Tell City, and it was kind of neat to see how people came to me, you know, to aid and help me to get through this. But again, this is, to me, it showed me what I have done. And it's not it's what we have done to make this place a better place. And I truly believe that, again, I'm going to apologize to my mother, but there is no place like home. I truly believe that the support that I got for the entire community and all around, that I got when I did get sick, and how they reached out to my family, and so that I really appreciate that. And that shows a lot, not only for me, but my staff and all my police officers and things like that. So that shows a lot. I lost you.
That's because I'm on mute, actually. Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah. But I wanted to acknowledge your mom's comments. She said, so, "Love you, Alan, Mom." And like I think the best way for me to finish up too is you consider this podcast episode experience not about you. And I think a prime example of that too is what makes you such a good leader of the community, because you put others before yourself. And through this tough chapter in your life, others were putting you above themselves. Like when you talk about Dave and Falker at the department, it's almost like you never left. And I'd like to think they did what they could in your absence, because, you know, not just to help the community, but also for you as well, in a way to honor you and to thank you for what you did. So I appreciate everything you've done. I appreciate the audience's involvement tonight too, all the comments. I think it was just outstanding. Again, the word powerful sticks out to me more than anything. And Sheriff, I'd love for you to stick around and give you a formal goodbye after we stop going live. But again, for the Facebook audience and the live audience all around on Twitter, I will have this out on Spotify and YouTube later on tonight. Other than that, please keep an eye on Facebook, and I'll let you know when the next Chapters podcast episode is. But again, Sheriff, we appreciate all of your time tonight. This has been another episode of Chapters, Real People, Real Stories.
Thank you.